Hello and welcome to the Intellect's Cove. I'm Colin Fairley. I'm a philosopher and political theorist based at Queen's University in Canada. And this is the second video on Chapter 7 of my new book, Aging and the Ethics of Longevity Science. You can download that book for free as an open access publication on the Oxford University Press website linked in the video description. So Chapter 7 focuses on the fair innings argument, women, and longevity science. In the previous video, I covered fair innings, longevity science, and I finished that video by talking about the proper questions that we should be asking and focusing our energy on trying to answer, and I'll pick up on that in this one. I'm going to amplify some of the details of the benefits that slowing down aging may offer women throughout the adult lifespan, especially around reproductive longevity and maternal health, which I think are very important but often neglected topics when we raise the issue of longevity science. In a previous video I posted on Chapter 1, Video 3, I mentioned Mary Shelley's Frankenstein and Mary Shelley's mother, Mary Wollstonecraft. So I just want to take a snapshot of something that I was addressing in that earlier video. So Mary Shelley's mother, Mary Wollstonecraft, tragically died a few days after giving birth to Mary Shelley. She was age 38. So she was what would be considered an advanced maternal age. And that is relevant to what it is that I'm going to be focusing on today, that actually translational gerontology may offer not only the prospect of extending reproductive longevity for females, but improving maternal health through the late 30s and fourth decade of life. And that is a morally laudable aspiration, given that many women in the world are delaying having children into later life. So I want to first amplify two empirical realities of the world today that are relevant when we're thinking about why translational gerontology may offer some distinctive benefits to the world's women. In the 20th century, female life expectancy in developed countries like the United States increased by 30 years, but this did not prolong the fertile years of life, right? So it's really important to understand that increasing life expectancy by targeting the diseases responsible for early life mortality does not alter the rate of biological aging in itself, and it does not alter the fertility of women. And the second point is that women in modern societies can expect to live nearly a third of their life in the post-reproductive phase of the adult lifespan. So I'm not going to be focusing on menopause in this video. It's not really a focus in the chapter in the book, but it is the focus of the future research I'm doing on this topic. So there may be future videos in the next year or two where I will offer a little bit more in terms of my thoughts about why translational gerontology is so important to women. I think it's probably one of the most important areas for translational gerontology to focus on. And there's basically, there's no discussions in bioethics about this particular topic. So I think there's a big need for getting the field to take seriously these topics and discussions. All right, so biological aging eventually reduces fertility and maternal health. And these empirical realities amplify why geroscience is so important to the women of the aging world. So one of the functions of this chapter, or the reason I focus on women for a variety of reasons, but we tend to think that aging research is only going to benefit people at the very last stage of life. When we focus on women's health and well-being, we can see that actually translational gerontology offers a variety of health economic benefits throughout the adult lifespan. And so that's why I'm going to focus in particular on reproductive longevity and maternal health, because these could be health benefits that females would be able to reap through the younger stage of the adult lifespan, not simply at the upper bounds of human longevity. So the average age of mothers having their first child is getting older in many countries, right? Women are having less children and they're delaying the age at which they have them. This also makes the potential benefits of translational gerontology particularly important in an aging world. If you look at the United States, in the year that I was born, in 1970, the average age of first birth for a woman in the United States was age 21, and that had risen to nearly age 27 in 2018. But the proportion of women having their first child after age 35 increased nearly tenfold. Right? So for many women that would like to have children, they are also trying to sort out their career, find a partner, ensure they're financially stable. And so they face this real crunch of trying to get all of this sorted out before the decline in their fertility, which will reduce the prospect of having a family, but also bring with it some health risks to themselves as well as to their offspring. And that is the predicament that I think translational gerontology could help to ameliorate some of the aspects of this predicament. With respect to fertility, a woman who is younger than 30 has an 85% chance of conceiving within a year of trying. This is then reduced by 10% at the age of 30, and then it's reduced down to 66% by the age of 35, and then down to 44% at the age of 40 due to the effect of aging on the ovary and eggs. Okay, so before age 30, there's an 85% chance of conceiving with a year of trying to conceive, but after age 40, at the age of 40, that is then declined to 44%, so like half of the success rate. So this matters. It's not a trivial factor. Many women would like to have children, and as I mentioned, in the modern context, they are balancing a variety of other commitments, and this is not an intuitive thing that we would think translational gerontology may actually be able to offer some potential benefits in terms of boosting reproductive longevity to allow women to remain fertile for longer and with better maternal health. So the pregnancy among older women, I mentioned Mary Wollstonecraft as an example, is accompanied by a higher incidence of pregnancy complications, failure to progress in labor, postpartum hemorrhage, that can endanger the health of the prospective mother. So is there any reason for believing that translational gerontology may offer benefits in terms of fertility and maternal health? And I say potentially. I think there are. I'm going to mention some of the evidence based on animal laboratories, but it's not conclusive at this stage. But I certainly think it's an example of experimental science that is worth pursuing to see if there could be benefits. There's a great article, Reproductive Longevity and Aging, Geroscience Approaches to Maintain Long-Term Ovarian Fitness in the Journals of Gerontology in 2021. And those are I'm going to draw on insights from that article. So if we look at caloric restriction, which is known for over 100 years, for nearly 100 years, slows down biological aging, it certainly seems to improve the reproductive longevity of mammals. Caloric restriction, of course, is not going to be something we would prescribe for humans, but the goal would be to then discover if there are safe and effective molecules that mimic similar effect. Now, in this article, they note that with metformin, one of the drugs that we mentioned before, and the first drug that will be tested as in the TAME trial to see if it slows down human aging, the science is inconclusive. It's conflicting as to whether or not metformin has an impact on the reproductive longevity in mice. But if such research were to show, like if it's not metformin, rapamycin, or some other molecule that demonstrates that it increases lifespan, if it increases reproductive longevity in a way that's safe and effective, then this would offer potentially the world's women an opportunity to increase the window of reproductive longevity and its accompanying improvement in maternal health. And in this chapter, I also focus on non-health benefits specifically for women. In most societies, especially in developing countries, a person's financial security is linked to their ability to work in paid employment. So women live longer in all regions of the world. But this is particularly important for countries that don't have the state pensions that we would enjoy, for example, in Canada, or the health care that we enjoy in Canada. So if one is in an agricultural community, remaining physically capable of farming is vital to sustaining the financial security of one's family. And so because women survive longer than men, many of their husbands die, they're now a widow. But if they remain healthier for longer, this would accrue economic benefits rather than exacerbating the health-span lifespan gap, which will be particularly problematic for more economically vulnerable portions of the population. So one of the things we really need to recognize with longevity science, it's not simply about keeping people alive longer. It's also about economic development. Healthy aging is part of economic development because it will enable people to remain productive and generating a revenue, especially in those countries where working is strongly a determinant of one's financial situation. So if you look at the percentage of older persons, this is about a decade old now, in receipt of a pension. So yes, in North America and Europe, 90% of the population, so you might say it's not so important. But when you look at sub-Saharan Africa and the Middle East, now we see less than half of the population can rely on a pension during their older age. So for that, those regions of the world, it's much more critical to remain healthy through older life, because that will be a main determinant of one's financial security. And finally, the other specific benefit that I think will mostly accrue to women of the world is that they take on a disproportionate amount of the caring burdens that typically fall upon daughters to care for their aging parents. Now, of course, we should be focusing on changing the patriarchal attitudes about who should be helping their parents, so sons can contribute more. But we also want to be aware of the fact that if we're exacerbating the health-span lifespan gap, as currently we are doing, this is going to create additional burdens that will fall disproportionately on the world's daughters. So worldwide, nearly 70 to 80% of the impaired older persons are cared for at home by family members, and varying estimates across different countries indicate that the majority of all caregivers of older persons are women. And so not only are these women devoting the additional time and energy to caring for their parents, this often comes as a result of not doing work outside the home, which would be financially, they would receive financial compensation for. So this caregiving at home is not financially. So it exacerbates their financial vulnerability in addition to giving them some unfair additional burdens because of the differences in investment in this caregiving between daughters and sons. In the United States, so just to give you one example of what this disparity in caregiving looks like, it's estimated that daughters provide on average about 13 and a half hours of care per month for their aging parents, whereas sons do less than half than that, about 6 hours, which means daughters spend more than twice as much time providing care to parents than do sons. So by championing the aspiration of rate control, which aspires to extend health span and compress the disparity between health span and lifespan, we would be releasing the pressures of people having to invest so much in the caring responsibilities for their aging parents. And so this would also offer some distinctive benefits to the women of the world. So it's really important, I argue in the chapter, to ask the right questions when we think about the ethics and societal implications of translational gerontology. It's not simply about increasing the number of years people live. Unfortunately, that is what the fair innings argument has dominated the discussions of bioethics. So I suggest we just reject that framing. The fair innings argument is of little value in helping us understand all of the intricacies involved in an ethical regulation of translational gerontology. And instead, I want to draw our attention to these 4 questions, which I want to argue are the right questions. Like, can we justify trying to improve the quality of life of older persons by increasing the health span? And in particular, most of the world's oldest population are female. And so when you frame it this way, rather than the abstract category of just older persons, where people's ageist stereotypes are likely to be activated, if you say, well, what about the women of the world? I suspect you'll get a very different answer when you fill in that detail than when you just simply say it in the abstract. Secondly, can we justify trying to increase reproductive longevity and improving maternal health? I think, again, there's going to be a compelling answer that yes, given the option, assuming it's safe and effective, to extend the duration of reproductive longevity and its accompanying improvement in maternal health, most women that plan to have a family would like the option of that additional time to sort out the selection of a proper mate, then their career, the financial security, and all the things that they would like to have arranged and in place before they begin a family. Can we justify trying to reduce the financial hardships of persons that they typically face in late life? Again, and this is particularly important for poorer regions of the world. So intuitively, people will think that translational gerontology is only concerned with benefiting the richest people in the richest countries. But actually, the biggest benefits, I would argue, will come to those that are most vulnerable to the environmental stressors that accelerate biological aging, and in those regions of the world where people don't enjoy the social assistance and provisions that richer countries typically offer for their older populations. And finally, can we justify trying to reduce the caring burdens that typically fall on daughters to care for their older parents? So I want to suggest that, there's an enthusiastic yes to all of these questions, but I at least want the field to focus on those questions rather than the fair innings framing, which simply says, should we extend the life of those who live longer already, which I think is a poorly formulated question. So that is the second video of Chapter 7 on Fair Innings, Women and Longevity Science. As I mentioned, I intend to write more on the topic of women's health, in particular around issues concerning menopause in the future. But for now, that's all I want to say on this topic.